At its peak, Intel was untouchable. It powered over 80% of the world's computers, made billions in revenue every year, and was so dominant that its competitors struggled to survive. But today, Intel is struggling to stay relevant. Its market share has plummeted, its once unstoppable dominance in the CPU industry has been challenged, and competitors like AMD and NVIDIA have left it in the dust. So how did one of the most powerful tech companies in history go from industry leader to falling behind? And more importantly, can Intel make a comeback? This is the story of Intel's rise, its shocking decline, and its fight for survival. To understand how far Intel has fallen, you first have to understand how powerful it once was. Intel invented the microprocessor in 1971. That's right. They didn't just dominate computing, they helped create modern computing. By the 1990s and early 2000s, Intel was the king of processors, making chips for nearly every major PC brand: IBM, Dell, HP, you name it. And in 2006, Intel made one of the most important deals in tech history. It became the exclusive chip supplier for Apple, powering every Mac for over a decade. For years, Intel's biggest marketing flex was simple. If your computer didn't have Intel inside, it was second rate. At its height, Intel was worth over $500 billion, making it one of the most valuable companies in the world. So, what went wrong? Intel's downfall didn't happen overnight. It was a series of missteps, missed opportunities, and growing competition that slowly chipped away at its dominance. And the first major problem? Complacency. For decades, Intel had zero real competition in the high-end CPU market. AMD was always second place, and most people didn't even consider it a threat. But Intel got comfortable. It stopped innovating as aggressively and relied on incremental upgrades instead of true breakthroughs. Meanwhile, AMD was hungry. In 2017, AMD released its Ryzen processors, offering more power, better efficiency, and cheaper prices than Intel's chips. Suddenly, for the first time in years, Intel was on the defensive. But instead of innovating, Intel made a huge mistake. It underestimated AMD. It kept pushing old technology, failed to upgrade its manufacturing process fast enough, and allowed AMD to eat away at its market share. Then came another massive blow. Apple ditched Intel. For over 15 years, Apple relied on Intel chips for its MacBooks and desktops. But in 2020, Apple announced it was moving to its own M1 chips, completely cutting out Intel. And the worst part, Apple's M1 chips weren't just replacements. They were better. Faster performance, lower power consumption, longer battery life. Intel had just lost one of its biggest customers, and it was becoming clear Intel wasn't leading the industry anymore. It was falling behind, but the biggest moment that sealed Intel's decline, its disastrous failure to lead in chip manufacturing. For decades, Intel was known for cutting-edge chip technology. It manufactured smaller, faster, and more efficient chips than anyone else. But in the 2010s, Intel fell behind in the race to smaller transistor sizes. While companies like TSMC and Samsung were successfully building 5 nanometer and 3 nanometer chips, Intel was still struggling to produce 7 nanometer chips. This wasn't just bad, it was devastating. Intel had always been ahead in manufacturing. Now it was years behind, and to make things worse, companies like Apple, NVIDIA, and even AMD weren't waiting around for Intel to catch up. They started working directly with TSMC, cutting Intel out of the process entirely. At this point, Intel was losing ground fast. It was being beaten by AMD in CPUs, by Apple in efficiency, and by TSMC in manufacturing. So the big question became, could Intel recover? Intel knew it had to change, or die. In 2021, Intel's CEO Pat Gelsinger made a bold announcement. Intel was going all in on manufacturing and would spend $20 billion to build new factories in the US to compete with TSMC. On top of that, Intel is pushing AI and data center technology, trying to get ahead of the next big wave of computing. And there's one thing Intel still has going for it. It's still massive. Despite all of its struggles, Intel still makes over $60 billion a year and holds significant market share in enterprise and government contracts. But the real question is it too late? Because AMD is still growing, Apple is pushing its own chips, and NVIDIA is leading the AI revolution. And if Intel doesn't execute flawlessly, it could go from being an industry leader to just another legacy tech company struggling to stay relevant. Intel's story is a warning for every tech giant. No company, no matter how powerful, is too big to fail. Intel dominated the market for decades, but arrogance, missed opportunities, and underestimating competition led to its decline. Now the company is in a fight for survival, trying to reinvent itself in a world that doesn't wait for second chances. So what do you think? Can Intel make a comeback, or has it already lost the race? Let me know in the comments. And if you love deep dives on tech industry battles, check out my video on Netflix. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another business breakdown. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.